Darwin actually didn't come up with the idea of evolution as in common descent.
There's the notion of us evolving from lesser beings or ape-like creatures. Is that a problem for you as a religious man?
Do you think apes are lesser beings?
No, yeah, good point. I don't actually. They're probably more human than us sometimes.
I think, no, I don't have a problem with that, no.
Okay, wow.
This
has been a great conversation. Okay, great. Now, why don't you? Because most religious people say, what? We didn't come from monkeys. Darwin was a Satanist. I've had already.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, was he? Why was he?
I'm exaggerating.
Okay.
I don't think literally a Satanist, but I agree. I think that he was totally wrong, scientifically.
Okay. So, where is the truth? Did we evolve from ape-like creatures?
Yeah.
Okay. But why is Darwin wrong? That's what he said.
Not really.
What did he say?
Well, actually, technically it's wrong, but I don't mean that. Technically, he didn't go that far, but putting that aside.
Yeah.
The Darwin actually didn't come up with the idea of evolution as in common descent, universal common descent, or common descent in general.
Okay.
Actually, that idea was around before, and that's why guys like Lamarck had his idea of how that would happen.
Who's that, Lamarck?
Well, yeah, Lamarck.
I don't know who that is.
Well, the people on the video, I'm sure will know.
Okay, right, yeah.
He's a famous guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, in this topic, anyway. So at the time in the British aristocracy, there was actually this idea of evolution was actually kind of the idea of common descent was actually coming into, there was people were talking about it, but it wasn't scientific.
Okay, so Darwin didn't actually come up with it at all.
No, people like Lamarck and Darwin, they came up with a scientific way to explain how that would have happened. So they didn't say that we came from monkeys. They said how we came from monkeys, or rather how monkeys came from other other animals.
We come from a common ancestor.
Yeah, common ancestor.
I mean,
exactly.
we do look pretty similar. To me, it's rather a coincidence if we're not somehow.
Yeah, so I totally agree that we do have a common ancestor. I think that all life has one common ancestor, and God created that.
Yeah.
But yeah, his idea was natural selection, and it wasn't called. He didn't know what mutations were, but the equivalent of random mutations. I forgot the term he used, but like
survival of the fittest.
No. I'm saying there was random variation. I think maybe that was the term.
Okay.
Yeah. So he said there's random variation, and then natural selection acts on that, and that's how we have common descent. So that was his idea. But the common descent itself was not his idea. Okay. Actually, I think the idea of natural selection came from his grandfather, but I'm not 100% sure about. But anyway,
it was in the family.
Yeah.
All right. So
the thing is, when you talk about, let's say, for example, recently, I'm going to lose most of your viewers with this, but I don't care. Anybody that's agreeing with me till now,
keep it going.
So the idea of intelligent design.
Yeah.
I think so. That I agree with intelligent design. So, the idea of intelligent design is not really against common ancestry. It's against the idea of natural selection and random mutation, right? Because if you, for example, if I made a, if I came up with an idea. This is obviously super hypothetical, but of creating an organism that could make other organisms, that would be not only intelligent but super intelligent. Because it's one thing coming up with a plan for an object, but the fact that for that object to make other objects, that's insanely crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So I think that that's the intelligent design. I think that's where the intelligent design is.
And I think why do religious people have a problem with God being that intelligent? As you said, that's more intelligent than I just created everything separately. I created man this day and the woman this day.
Yeah, well, if you take the Bible literally, then you have a problem with it. But but I mean, many there's many Christians that don't take it literally, and I mean, obviously in the ultra-Orthodox community, they basically is taken literally. But there's among other Orthodox.
Generally, yeah.
No, pretty much universally. Well, I guess nowadays is probably. I'm sure there's some people that don't. Some rabbis that would say, well, maybe not. But
because it does tend to be that the more religious you are,
Yeah.
the more literal you take things. But
Yeah.
if the more spiritual you were, you might take it in a more allegorical, metaphorical
Yeah,
way.
exactly. So, yeah. So the thing is that Darwin's theory is like there's zero evidence for his theory. Really, although Darwin spoke about natural selection, really his theory is really based on, even though he doesn't stress it so much, it's actually on the random variation part, because natural selection itself is a tautology.
What's
right?
a tautology mean?
A tautology means it has to be that,
Okay.
right? The survive. Okay, let me explain it. So natural selection means that this is the survival of those that are, well, you could say the fittest, right? I know some people will disagree with that term, but it's the survival
Well, it gets
of the ones that,
misinterpreted, doesn't it? To mean
Yeah.
not necessarily the strongest.
okay,
it's
so
just
if the fit
whichever
exactly, so
best
survival of the
suited.
fittest, but the fittest doesn't mean the strongest.
Yeah.
It just simply means that the ones that are fittest to survive,
Yeah.
which basically means that it's the survival of the survivors.
Is this the tall giraffes could reach the leaves? So
It's a
only
survival.
tall
Yeah.
giraffes
No, but my
survive.
point is, it's a theory of the survival of the survivors, which is a tautology. Of course, the survivors survive.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. Okay, got
Okay,
it.
so it's
yeah,
a tautology. So the thing is, so really, his theory is not based on natural selection, because that has to be, although it's true, it has to be true.
Yeah.
So really, his theory is based on the idea that these random variation, because of natural selection, which is a tautology, can create all the life we see today.
Yeah.
Right? That's a theory, right? So, but you have to have evidence for that. There's
Okay.
there's precisely zero evidence for that theory. So
Wow.
anyway, that's the long answer.
Yeah, no, it's a very good answer.
Yeah.
And you didn't shy away from the idea that God could use evolution, but
Well, I wouldn't
you
say
also-
use evolution.
Well,
I think the term use evolution sounds a bit funny. Because,
Yeah, no, you're right.
But I know what you're trying to say.
Right. Yeah,
I know what
yeah.
you're trying to say.
It's hard to.
I
express it
believe that he
sometimes.
designed, and I think that you can. The thing is that there's something called there's parts of the DNA. I forgot what's it called. Regulatory DNA, which like regulates the other parts of the DNA that are actually creating the proteins and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So you can see in the design of the DNA that it's actually designed to, to control itself.
Yeah.
So this is not. I mean, and this is mainstream science. This is not something that I'm just.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very well versed in it.
And I mean,
You must
I've
have
looked into
studied,
I've
a lot
looked
of
into
science.
this. I mean, there's something called epigenetics, right?
Epigenetics.
Yeah. And if you look at epigenetics on the internet, it'll tell you that it doesn't change the code.
What does epi mean?
Epi.
Skin?
I think
Epidermis? The
I
skin?
think no. I think it means like. I don't know what it means, but it means something like similar to.
Oh, similar to.
So
okay,
it's like
yeah, yeah.
similar to genetics, but I don't know what the meaning of the
Yeah,
word
yeah,
epi. But you get the idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not. So the thing is that epigenetics is about. So they're saying that epigenetics doesn't change the underlying DNA. If you look it up on Google, if you go to Wikipedia, that's what it says. But if you look a little bit deeper, right, and you look at there's different kinds of epigenetics. One of them is called methylation.
Okay.
This is the how the changes happen in the epigenetics. And basically, methylation is a change in one of the histone in the different nucleotides, and it basically changes the code. But the way they've worded it is to make it sound like it doesn't change the code. What I'm trying to say is, to cut it short, is that we know already that the DNA is controlled by other DNA and it's changing the code. So the idea that it's all done through randomization when you have zero evidence, and when we know that epigenetics. By the way, epigenetics happens constantly, right? So when somebody's in the mother's stomach, it's happening like 1 trillion times,
Yeah.
right? It's not like a rare thing.
Okay.
This is how it works. So we're ignoring what happens all the time, constantly, of trillions of organisms happening all the time, and we're ignoring all that, and they're believing in something that has zero evidence, which is the idea of randomization causes changes in genetics that can be positive, that can function properly. So that's my long answer.
It's a great answer, and I think it explains why religious people tend to just put the full stop there and say, no, it's only a theory. You've looked at the science.
I've looked at the science,
a lot
yeah.
deeper.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, I'd like to look at it a lot deeper than that, because to make it more that scientists can look at that and really. I mean, scientists can look at what I've said, but
Yeah.
obviously because I'm not trained, they might look at it as something, a word that I've said wrong or somewhere, and they'll say, oh, it's the guy's
Sure,
not
someone in the comments will know.
But if there's anybody that is trained and is and doesn't want to nitpick, but actually wants to look at the science properly and can verify that, or talk about it, that would be great. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.